All right, thanks, TJ. Hey everyone, thanks for joining and happy Monday. My name's Mark Layton. I'm an M365 engineer, and today I'm going to be talking about Teams Rooms devices and specifically how to configure them and hand them off to an on-site technician. So, if you are familiar with an event called InfoComm, it just took place, I guess, about a month ago in Las Vegas, about 3 weeks ago. And InfoComm is one of the world's largest AV, and Teams Rooms devices type of event. And so I had a teammate, John Baker, who sits in Greenville with me, and we together we were able to configure 8 Microsoft Teams Rooms devices, 6 Android and 2 Windows devices for InfoComm. And so I put together some documentation based on our experiences with everything we did. So I'm going to go ahead and go into that now. Okay, the agenda. So we're going to talk about the shared foundation behind every Teams Rooms, because we are going to talk about Windows-based operating systems and Android. They are different, but we'll talk about how they're the same. I'll talk about Android. We're going to start with Android, and I'll do a demo. Then we'll do Windows and a demo. We'll talk about the different admin portals that you'll need to go into, and then at the end we'll do Q&A and just some resources for you. Okay, so what everybody probably knows, but what is a Microsoft Teams room? If you go into a conference room and they have Microsoft as their solution, then you'll have a Teams room in there. It'll be a series of hardware, cameras, whatever it is, to be able to run the conference room. And why is that important? Because in today's world, we have what we call the AI-powered workplace. And so we have Teams as, basically the foundation, and then you have Teams devices that sit on top of that to allow for collaboration. You want people to be able to go into meeting rooms, in conference rooms, and be able to have a good experience. And that's what this is about, setting it up to allow the on-site technician to configure and get it done, and then allow your collaboration in your rooms. So you can see some of the pieces that will be needed to make that happen. Now, I'm going to be talking about Teams Rooms Pro today, because a lot of the features that are built into Teams Rooms Pro help you to deploy and manage these devices. With that said, you can use Teams Rooms Basic, and I'll start what you can if you have you can use up to 25 rooms, but if you have a 26th room, you would need to go to Teams Rooms Pro. That's the only limitation there. So one of the things I'll call out is if you have Teams Rooms Pro, you're going to have Teams Rooms Standard, Teams Phone Standard. So what that allows you to do is it allows the room to make and receive phone calls if you add a calling plan. It has Teams Rooms Pro has Intune, which allows for you to do things like push applications and policy. It's very important, considering some of the things I'm going to talk about today. It also has Entra ID P1 to allow for things like conditional access policies and specifically exclusion of conditional access policies for resource accounts. In my environment, everything that goes into Intune also gets pushed into Defender for Endpoint, so you have that as a sensor if you want to, and you can set up endpoint detection and response even on your Teams Rooms devices. And then you can just see down here the availability based on whether it's Pro or Basic. So again, today's session is built on the fact that you're using Pro licensing, but be aware that you could also do some of this stuff with Basic. Okay, let's talk about the differences between Android and Windows. And before I get into the details, I just want to give my own personal take on this, because I've deployed many types of devices like this. Android devices in some ways are a little bit easier to deploy. Okay. With that said, about 75% of the devices that are sold, the Microsoft Teams Rooms devices that are sold through TD SYNNEX, are Android based. Okay. So the market or the hardware manufacturers have chosen Android as a primary from an operating system perspective. With that said, if it was me and I was outfitting conference rooms for Teams Rooms devices, I would probably use Windows. And the reason is because Windows, let's be honest, Teams was built for the Windows operating system, and then they have to accommodate other operating systems like Mac and Android. Now, with that said, Teams Rooms on Android is a great experience, just like Windows. My own personal preference would be Windows because I like the Windows operating system. Just my take. Okay, so Android devices you've got an appliance with collaboration bar, whereas with Windows devices you have a compute engine, almost like a Windows laptop, and then you'll have peripherals built on that. Android does AOSP, which is the Android open source project of device management, or from a deployment perspective. And then with just like you would a Windows endpoint, with you use Partner Center and the PKID registration, which I'll show you. Just know that device administrator is a deprecated solution now, so in favor of AOSP for Teams Rooms devices. With Windows devices, you're going to use Autopilot and what's called Auto Login. So if you're familiar with how to roll out a Windows laptop or desktop with Autopilot, it's somewhat similar with Windows-based devices. And then with Android, so you sign in, you're going to have some Intune policy and potentially conditional access policies. Same thing with Windows, you'll use Intune. You can set up local admin password policy and some other things, and then conditional access. And then easy tech setup, it's the same with Teams Rooms on Windows, it's just it uses a different method, and that's auto login and autopilot. So resource accounts, licensing, and Exchange Room mailboxes and Pro Management Portal are all shared by both platforms. So let's dig in a little bit more about what you would need to do inside each platform. So Teams Rooms Pro ties the device to the room and helps with auto login. You can monitor, you can set up a lot of different settings of the devices, like things that the camera is going to do and stuff like that, and then you can actually remotely manage. I'll show you that in a demo here in a few minutes. Then with Entra ID, you're going to have your resource account identity. You're going to have your groups and your conditional access policies you're going to have to configure. Intune has a big part to play in this as well. If you enroll your devices in Intune, there's a lot of things you can do. Like I said, enrollment status page, autopilot, things like that. And then the last two portals that you'll use will be M365 Admin Center. And for Windows-based devices, you might need to use Partner Center to register the devices just like you would a Windows endpoint, and you use the PKID for that. So we'll talk about that. All right, so all the rooms, or both Android and Windows, they share the same thing. So you have to have a resource account, and then you assign it, in this case, I'm going to assign it the Pro license, but you could use Basic. You configure Exchange Room mailbox settings and set the time zone, for example. So my teammate John was going to be in Las Vegas, and that's where Infocom was for this event, and it's Pacific. So I used PowerShell to configure the Exchange Room mailbox settings and do some PowerShell for time zone. And then another thing you have to use PowerShell for, or at least I did, was disabling the password expiration. So you don't want the resource account, you guys probably know this, but a resource account, you can almost think of it as a user account, right? So the resource account, you don't want it to have a password expiration policy, because one day somebody will walk into the room and there'll be a thing on the screen that says, please enter, please change your password or something like that. So you'll use PowerShell for these two things. Another thing you'll do is you exclude the resource account from MFA-based conditional access. I'll show you how to do that. And then the last thing I do as an administrator, because I want to make sure that the resource accounts are doing what they're supposed to do, like bypassing MFA, is I'm going to validate the Teams Room resource account by signing in, making sure it is excluded from MFA, and then there's also an administrator test that I'm going to do, and I'll show you that. Okay, so Android is it's a little bit of a different flow. There's a lot of things that cross over for Android versus Windows-based, but in this case, we'll talk about Android. So we are going to create the resource account and assign it a Pro license. We want to make sure we do some PowerShell to do the time zone and make sure that the password never expires. We're going to exclude it from the conditional access. We're going to enroll the device into Android open source device management and apply a compliance policy, which is a requirement within if you want to enroll it into Intune on the device. And then when you get to the device, or I guess I should have written this differently, you're going to want to sign in with the resource account and validate the room. As an administrator, or as a cloud engineer myself, I'm going to want to do that and verify that MFA is excluded before I hand it off to the on-site technician. Once I've done that, I'll go into the Teams Rooms Pro portal, make sure everything looks good, and then I'm ready to hand it off to the on-site tech. So that will lead us to our first demo. Before I get into, now remember, we try to be a source of really valuable information here at TD SYNNEX, and I saw something that was really important today. So before I get into the Teams Android, I wanted to briefly mention this. This just popped up in my inbox about an hour ago. For those of you that are familiar with MFA, obviously that's a big deal. Microsoft is going to be, if you haven't seen this, it's just something that popped up for me today that was new. They're going to remove SMS and voice-based authentication, and that will be, I believe it's sometime in February. So just be aware that that's coming. And why is that important? because it probably will affect every single tenant in the world. Because I'm sure somebody somewhere has SMS set up as a authentication method. So get ready for there to be a lot of questions and support cases around this, because on one hand, Microsoft is saying you have to have MFA, and now they're removing some of the most common policies. So I just wanted to at least mention that. Okay, going back to Android-based MTR devices. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create a resource account. So if you go under Rooms and Equipment, here's all the ones that we created for the Infocom. Now, there's a few of these weren't created for the Infocom event, but 8 of them were. So the one I'm going to focus on now is this one right here. If you've heard of Shure, Shure is a hardware company just like Logitech or any one of those companies that creates Teams Rooms devices. And the way that me and my teammate John Baker, we decided to name these were, he wanted to have them, because he's going to be on site deploying these, so he wanted to have the names mean something to him. So the letter A at the end indicates Android. That helps him understand that it's an Android device. And I'll show you Windows-based in a minute. So here's the room. You can drill in after you create it. You just do add resource, and you go through and you do a few things. You click through the boxes. And then what you want to do is you have to edit your Exchange settings, edit your booking options depending on what you want. There's definitely some default settings that you could consider, but in some cases these might be specific to your organization. So I also did some PowerShell, and I'll just show you this. When you set your calendar processing, you wanted to do things like set it to auto accept and stuff like that. And then you could even do a message that says your meeting has been scheduled. So if a user goes to book a meeting, it will automatically reply and say your meeting has been scheduled. In this case, it was a Jabber device. This could say TD Synex, whatever you want to customize that. So that's the calendar processing. And a lot of that stuff I did with PowerShell. Okay, once you've created your room, you can go to users and go to active users. And here's that room. And again, this is the Android-based device, and I've assigned it Teams Rooms Pro. And then when I've done that, now I have I've got the dependency to be able to do all the management features that we're about to talk about, like with things like intra-conditional access policies, MFA exclusion, Intune, and stuff like that. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so now flip over to my notes here. All right, so we've done that. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to go to Intra, or in my case, Intune, because I like Intune better, and you're going to go to Groups, Intra Groups, and you're going to want to create a dynamic device group. That's what I recommend in the documents, or Microsoft Docs also recommend it. In this case, I call it Microsoft Teams Rooms on Android, so that stands for on Android. So OA indicates Android for anyone really, but I've actually seen this in the documentation. So in my case, I created a dynamic membership rule, and over time, while I've been working on these devices, you can see that it's grown. Okay, so I've worked with Poly. I've worked with. You can set it to where you can set your logic to get the devices enrolled into the group to be enrollment profile names. I just recently had to add this logic for Shure. You can see that was the manufacturer. But in any capacity, once you do that, as these devices come online, and remember that you're going to set all this up. Excuse me, you're going to set up these resource accounts, and these devices will not be online yet, right? You'll have to wait until the on-site tech powers them. And once they do, you'll have a catch-all group that these devices will go into based on your logic, okay? All right, so and then you can target policy and apps if you want to this group. Okay, so that's what you're going to want to do there. And then again, remember that for the resource account that you're setting up, you're probably going to go do some configuration settings, and there's some PowerShell to do there. And I have a guide for you that I'm going to share later, but for right now, I'm just talking through this from a demo perspective. Okay, as I mentioned before, you're also going to need to make sure that every single resource account, Android and Windows, are excluded from MFA. So I created a group in a dynamic group, and this is think of it as a dynamic user group, right? Because resource accounts are like users, okay? They're used to log in with like a username and password. So I created a catch-all. It's called MTR CA bypass, and that's to be for any of my devices. Now, one of the things you can do, the easy button, would be to, when you create your resource account, if you go into your user department, you could create a fictitious department called resource accounts for MTR. If you do that, every single account that you create will have that department, and then it'll automatically get enrolled into this group. But if you want to, you can go do other things like display name starts with this, or display name starts with this. We created for this event, we created the name Logi Lounge was one of the names of the resource accounts, right? So in any capacity, when you do this, your your resource accounts will then be enrolled into the group, and then you go into Entra, and you can go under conditional access. Actually, I prefer to do it in here. I'll just go into Intune and do it. But if you go under conditional access, and in our case, we have a conditional access policy that says all users. There's so many. So let me see if I can find it. There it is. Require multi-factor for all users, and then you can see here if I go under to the exclusions, and here's that group, MTR CI bypass. Now in my case, I also have, this is for my Windows-based devices, but this is a catch-all for all my resource accounts that will bypass MFA. Okay, so that's how you do that. And then you can test that once you've created your account. You can test that by going in, and you can log in. Okay, I don't know why this is happening. Hang on. I can show you this. If I go to, I'm going to create a new private window so that I can log in, and I'll go log in like I'm logging into the Microsoft service, and then I use my resource account. Here it is. This is the one I showed you. It's A, indicates Android. And then you use the password. Now in my case, for all 8 of the resource accounts, I use the exact same password to make that easy for the on-site technician. Now what I'm doing here is I'm proving to you and I'm showing that the exclusion through MFA is working. So as I log in, I've used my username and password, which is what the on-site technician will do. I click Next. And right here, instead of requiring me to do MFA, which you can do that, but you don't want to do that, this right here, that skip setup, allows to bypass MFA, which is by design. Now we know by doing that test that when the on-site technician gets the device and they start powering it, we know that it'll work because this account has been tested for MFA exclusion. Okay, so that's something that I do to hand it off, because when I got to my teammate, when I hand this off to my teammate John, who's going to be in Las Vegas deploying these devices at Infocom, I don't want him to have any hiccups or problems, because that's just going to be a callback to me for something to fix. So we're just trying to get ahead of all those things. Okay, if you want to use Intune, you're going to have to do a policy. If you go to enrollment and you click on Android, you'll see that there's different enrollment methods. So a lot of people may be familiar with these. The Android open source project is the one that you're going to want to use. And in this case, I think I did user devices. So here you can see my team's devices, and you can see that 21 devices are enrolled. And the token doesn't expire till 2090, so probably good there. That's probably enough time. Okay, so the point is that this is required. You have to have this AOSP, Android Open Source policy, to get your device enrolled into Intune. The other thing you need to do is, if you go to compliance and you go to, you'll see that I have another one called AOSP Device Management Compliance Policy, and you can see that there's 21 devices, or 21 compliant, to match what we just showed you for the enrollment profile that's required. So these are the 2 things that you have to do. You have to go do this, and you can see that I've connected this to the various groups, and even more specifically this one, the dynamic device group, which catches all of the devices. Okay, all right, so there's that. And then there's another thing too, is this is one thing I'll just call out, and this goes across the board for any types of devices. I had considered pushing the Zoom application to these devices so that if someone wanted to join a Zoom meeting, they could do that. But when I went to look that up, what I found is that they have the guest login that you can configure. But in order to do that, and I'm not going to get into the weeds too much on this, but there's basically a way for a person to log in if they're not in your organization or if they're a guest user. But in order to do that, when I started digging into the documentation, and I'll drill down here and show you this, You have to go into, if you're using Defender for Office, which we do use that, you have to go and create a safe links policy. And even more specifically, you have to call out the URLs that will be allowed to be used, right? So in my case, it's these: zoom.com, and if you're a Gov customer, right? Now, again, what I'm doing is I'm excluding, or basically what I'm doing is I'm allowing the safe links to work with my Teams Rooms devices in case there's a person who wants to guest join. Okay? All right, so that's another thing you might want to look at. And then I already talked about validating the room from the user, from the perspective of the user or the resource account. But let's talk about, there's another one that you can do for the account. So now I've created the account, and the account's been deployed. So I want to go and test. There's a test for this. You guys have probably seen this before. There's other ones you can do for Exchange Online and things like that. I've already logged in with my global admin account to do this. It requires global administration to do this. In my case, this is an Android device. I'm going to check here. It says that I'm not a robot, and I'll acknowledge that. And then I'm going to perform the test. Now, just remember, I've already logged in as the user resource account to confirm that MFA has been bypassed. This test is a different test that's going to go and look at different things to make sure that the device is working. Now, most people would look at this and say, "Oh, look, this has failed." I like Brad's comment in the chat. That was pretty good. Okay, so about robots. So okay, so this says failed, which would seem like there's a failure, okay? And you think, wow, Mark has failed here. But if you dig in and you look, I've got a lot of green check marks. Now, this says confirm if the user has any conditional access policies, and you can think of user here as the resource account. I just showed you that it does have a condition that it does have conditional access policies assigned because it's excluded from MFA. So you have to be careful. Sometimes this will return something that's not true, or maybe it's just not reading that conditional access policy is applied. So if you feel comfortable with this, that's fine. And then the other one is there's maybe some stuff here in the tenant that you need to look at, right? So, but in most cases, if you scroll through here, you're going to see the green check marks. That's going to make you feel good, and you'll know that you can hand this off to the on-site tech. The other thing to note is if you do this test before the device has been deployed, then you will see more red stuff, right? Less green check marks because the device hasn't been deployed yet, hasn't called home. You've only done the upfront config work. So now I've done all the upfront config work, and now I'm ready to say, okay, let me hand this off. So all I sent John, the on-site technician, was a list of 6 Android accounts that I had created and a password, and that's all he needs. And then everything else happens through Teams Rooms Pro licensing, which has a lot of features, and then Intune and Entra and everything pushed to make sure these things are configured correctly. Let's see. Let me go back at my notes. Okay, and then, oh, there's one other thing too. Sorry, I should have told you this. So let's say I created this one first. I can't remember which order I created, but let me go back and just so you can see the list. I believe maybe it was this one that I created, but what I did was once I created this one account, I knew that my settings were exactly what I would want, and they would be exactly right. I've tested it, and I'm good. So I went and I built a PowerShell command to create 5 more accounts, and the only thing you really have to put into the PowerShell command is what the names of the new accounts were. So in this case, I'd go and add one called Microsoft Express install, things like that. And I will share with you at the end of this session, I'll share with you 2 blog posts that I created showing you exactly how to do all this step by step. And even more importantly, once you create your template account, you can use PowerShell to go create the other accounts. So to repeat that, I created one account, I tested it, made sure it was right, and then I used PowerShell to create 5 more accounts. When I was done, I sent simply the names of these resource accounts with one shared password, because obviously you want to make it easy for your on-site technician. Each resource account could have its own password, but I gave it one singular password to make it easy for the on-site technician. And by the way, when you create the resource account, you'll have to do an initial password, and then I went back and changed it for each one so that they were all the same for the on-site techs. Okay, that is Teams Rooms Android. And it's like, oh, that's easy, right? And I promise you that I left out some stuff, and there's some other things you have to do with PowerShell, so it's not as easy as it seems. I banged my head against the wall for many, many hours just to be able to kind of show you this and make it easy. Okay, now we'll switch to Windows-based devices. You will use the same thing. You're going to have to create a dynamic group. In this case, we're going to register the device using the PKID, and we're going to use Partner Center for that. Intune has some other things you're going to do, like a provisioning tool, an enrollment status page, and autopilot. You'll do the same. It's almost the exact same for the resource account. Assign it the Pro license and maybe some PowerShell to do time zone and password expire. Expiry. I wonder if that's a word. Okay. And then Entra ID, same thing. Exclude and then test. Okay. So let's jump into that. The first thing I'm going to do in my case is I go and create a resource account, and this one's going to be the dynamic device group, just like I showed you for Android. And my dynamic membership rule, this one's easier, right? I'm assuming that all of my devices are going to be registered through Partner Center, just like if you're using autopilot for Windows-based, Surface laptop or something like that. You can do the same thing with MTR devices, and specifically Windows-based. Now just remember, I've switched to Windows. So what I'm doing is I created a dynamic membership rule that says if the order ID from Partner Center starts with MTR dash, then I want you to enroll it in the group. So now I'm going to flip over to Partner Center. This is simulating an end customer tenant. This is one of our demo tenants here. And if I go under devices, this is where I do all my my full lifecycle testing. I lost my token, so I got to get another token. There we go. Okay, I go to devices and I go down here, and you can see right here, MTR, Jabra, Lenovo. This is one that I did. Or actually, let's just use this one, MTR. This is the one I actually did for Infocom. Okay, here's what we call my group tag right here. And the key to this is you can see it's MTR dash. And so, sorry, I'll try to highlight that. MTR dash is the key here. So I went and I registered this device. Okay, these are my two devices. And when I registered them, it automatically, not only did it register it to the tenant, but then it automatically enrolled it into that group. And why is that important? Because you need to be able to target things to that group, right? So if I go here, you can see that based on that dynamic membership rule, I've had 4 Windows-based Microsoft Teams Rooms devices enrolled into this group. And then I target lots and lots of policy that we're about to talk about to that group. In the same fashion, I also have, I've got as we're sticking on the subject of groups, I've got there's the conditional access bypass, and you'll find those Windows-based Teams Rooms devices in there as well for conditional access. So to recap, I've got a dynamic device group for Android devices, a dynamic device group for Windows-based MTR devices, and I have a user group that's dynamic membership based for the resource accounts for MFA exclusion, or I can target policy there if I want to as well. Okay, let me look at my notes. Okay, so here's what you have to do that is different about Windows. There's one application that's required. I think it's MTRP. So if you go into the documentation, you'll see this. You can go and download an Intune Win file, and that is what helps the device get updated when it does what's called autopilot and auto login. So when it logs in, it's going to call home to Intune and start pushing this application. You can see that I just did this back in April, and it's highly recommended that this gets updated accordingly, because if it's an older version, then it's just going to require your on-site tech to spend more time doing manual updates. So that's important. There's a good chance you're going to want to do what's called an enrollment status page, just like your Windows-based, just like an endpoint. In my case, I created one for MTR. It's called an enrollment status page. And the most important thing that I'll call out for this type of policy would probably be show an error when the installation takes a certain amount of time. This defaults to 60 minutes, and you might want to give your on-site tech more time. So you can create, make it 120, 2 hours, or longer. And then you can even go in there and say, hey, we're having a problem, please, and I say, please reach out to me. So if there's an on-site technician that's working on something and they have no idea what's going on, and they see an error, they can send me an email and I can help them troubleshoot that. Okay, let's see what else. Again, in the same fashion, I used that catch-all for the resource accounts. I excluded MFA. And then I'll go and test the account the same way. I want to test the resource account, make sure that it is excluded from MFA. Now, one of the things that I'll show you what was really cool is if I go into devices and I go here, and let me see if I can find my the one that I want to show you. It's this one right here. I deployed a device in for my teammate in Canada. It's a Jabber device. This was about when was that? I can't remember. It was a couple months ago. My teammate's in Canada. His name is Varundeep, and he was deploying a Microsoft Teams Rooms device, and it was Windows based. So we went through, we did everything, and then he was having problems where he couldn't get logged in. So what I did was I went into, and this is something I haven't talked about yet, the Teams Rooms Pro portal. If you go into Rooms, this is really cool. After the device comes online, if I go down here, you can see there's remote access, and I can actually connect to the device. Okay, so while this is connecting, let me explain. When I rolled out the device, my teammate up in Canada, so he's over 1,000 miles away from me in Calgary, Canada, he was not able to get into, he was going to have the same error I'm about to show you. I want to log into the settings, okay? Can't log into the settings. Why? Because you're not an admin. Now, there's a setting inside of Entra, and this is really cool. Under devices, and people probably know this, under device settings, and this is really helpful if you're a global administrator and you're deploying these devices. The global administrator rule is added as a local administrator on the device during Entra join. So since we're doing autopilot, this device gets added. I go back to the room. I can type in my credentials, my global admin credentials here, username and password. And this is how I did this. I got logged in. I was able to change the local administrative password so that the on-site technician could then get into the settings. Okay, so this is how, and then remote access is super helpful. I mean, if you really want to, you can get into the back-end settings and you can do a lot of different things. But the key is you're going to hear from you'll have to have some sort of admin to log in. Okay, and we had a problem, so I was able to use my global admin credentials to get by this. Okay, so I'm just sharing my notes because it was really helpful for us. So let me end that session. And again, just remember that I just showed you I connected to a Teams Rooms device it took about 10 seconds. And that device is sitting in Calgary, Canada, and I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. So that was pretty cool. So another thing I did was for another one of our devices, after it had come online, you can get some, I'm trying to remember where this was. I forget. There's a place in here where you can get some information about the device. And let me see if I can find it. What's that? This one. Anyways, I can't, let me see if I can find it real quick. Sorry, guys. Give me a second. Here it is. So the problem is that I couldn't find the device model in order to be able to do autopilot. So what I did was after the device had come online, and you can see here, this is another one of the devices that we did. It was a Logitech device. It runs IoT Enterprise, so it's a Windows-based device. And then when I went down to here, what was it? It was the device model. I think that was it. Here it is. This is what I was missing. I couldn't do the device registration because I did not have the PKID and I didn't have the device model. So after it enrolled, I was able to go get this from the Teams Rooms portal and go and retroactively go register the device for autopilot. So that was another helpful thing that I'll share. And then inside the Teams Rooms portal, which you'll only have access to if you have Teams Rooms Pro licensing, one of the other things you'll have to do is if you go under inventory, you're going to want to click sync after you've done some autopilot stuff and after you've done the autopilot registration with the PKID. And once you do that, you'll see these devices pop up. So you can see here's all the devices that I've rolled out and are inside the Teams Rooms Pro portal. And then you can see a list of your resource accounts. If you want to, if there's an issue, you can actually generate a one-time passcode for the on-site technician. So that's really helpful if you're deploying these devices. Here's where you'll be able to see your Windows Autopilot devices, and these are only going to be Windows-based. They won't be Android. And there's a lot of different settings that you can do if you want to go play around with Teams Rooms Pro. But even more specifically, if I go to Rooms, I drill into this one, and I go to Settings. Where is it? Let's see, Settings. There are so many settings here if I go to the device, and a lot of this stuff, I'm just going to be honest with you, this is kind of out of the bounds of the things that I work on because I'm not like an audiovisual person. I'm not deploying the room and I don't know what's happening, but there's so many different things that you can do here that you can go and configure. And even more specifically, this is because of Teams Rooms Pro licensing. So there's a lot of things you can do with the peripherals and the devices that you can do in here. Like I'm going to go ahead and do this. Turn on Room Facilitator, right? That helps. Let's see, we'll apply it now. Oh no, we'll apply it during a maintenance window. That'll work. So there's a lot of settings that you can do here in the Teams Rooms Pro portal that are very helpful, like updating, setting up ring configurations for updates and things like that. Okay, let me make sure I've got my notes here and I've done everything. Just a second. Here, just so you can see how much work actually went into this. This is my config file for MTR. This is all my PowerShell and everything like that. I could probably scroll for a while. So this is all the work that I did. I know it's very tiny, but this is all the work that I did to do this. So hours and hours of trying to boil this down into a 1-hour presentation to make it easy for you to deploy these solutions. Okay, so that's Teams Rooms on Windows. All right, a couple more slides and then some just some resources for you guys, and then we'll call it a day. So these are some of the things you want to do to make sure the on-site tech is set up correctly. So again, password set, validate everything, make sure the password's not going to expire. Whoops. Intune enrollment and get those things pre-staged ahead of time. If you have problems, you can remote into the device and you can you can help the on-site tech, which is, in my case, I had to do that. I suggest Teams Rooms Pro, but you can use Basic, and there's going to be some PowerShell you have to do. We haven't even talked about the network, but there's some considerations there. It's kind of outside of the boundary of the things that I work on, but I mean, you have to be involved if you're doing the configurations, but I didn't get into that, but there's a lot to consider there. And then just the checklist, like making sure everything's ready to go before you hand it off to the user, or the on-site tech, so that they're ready to deploy. So here's some takeaways. So you got the resource account. I recommend the Pro license and the Room Mailbox as the foundations for Android and Windows. Android does AOSP, Android open source project plus Intune, and Windows has Partner Center. You've got things like Lapse Policy and Autopilot for deployment. Teams Rooms Pro Management Portal ties the device to the room and enables remote support. So I had to use that in order to complete the config. That was super helpful. And then once I've verified everything, I hand it off to the on-site tech to make sure that they're going to be successful. What I've done is, and by the way, if you have questions around Windows and Android devices, okay, specifically, reach out to my teammate Bianca. She can help you. We also have resources. I've got a teammate, another Mark, because my name's Mark. Another teammate, his name is Mark Bassford. Some of you may know him if you worked with him. We have a whole team, and also my teammate John Baker. They're going to be the team that are going to be able to assist you with like on-site deployment questions and how do I build this out? And oh, I need an extra camera for this or an extra microphone over here to make sure that this room is going to do exactly what it needs to do. We have resources like that. As promised, I did create 2 blog posts, and I'll show you those now. And I'm going to share those links, and I'll share those links with you. I created a blog post, and this was specifically for Infocom, and you can see. This has all the pieces. This one's for Android, deploying Android devices. And then once you've created your template, sorry for all the scrolling. Let me see where I did it. I forget. Oh, here it is. Now I've created one, and then I created a PowerShell for you, and all you really have to do is go in and change your account. Okay? If you run this, it'll create multiple accounts for you. In my case, this is how I created the other 5 accounts to give John a total of 6, the on-site technician. So I'm going to put this in the chat now. Here is the Android blog post that will help you walk through, and then there's also one for Windows. And again, remember, this includes everything. So everything I've talked about today, along with PowerShell, to show you how you create everything, all the PowerShell and everything. The only thing that I changed was you have to kind of go in, it'll be generic, so you have to just change your resource account name, but pretty much everything is just going to be copy paste. So like when you get down here, you can see here's the PowerShell to configure the mailbox or the calendar processing, for example, right? And this, I used PowerShell 7 because some of the commands require PowerShell 7, so I just recommend using PowerShell 7 or Cloud Shell when you're doing this. Something I found the other day that was really cool is if you go to Terminal and you right-click, I did not know this. You can actually, here's Cloud Shell. You just open Azure Cloud Shell. I guess that was Maybe I should have already known that, but anyways, that was kind of cool. So I'm going to start using Cloud Shell because you don't have to have like different modules installed and things like that. So I'm actually recommending Cloud Shell, but I had to use PowerShell 7. So there's the links to the two, and I put this in here too. You'll get access to these slides. And before I let you go, because we got a couple more minutes and I can open it up to Q&A, I created a file folder for this. Let me show you. Here's my file folder, and I'm going to give you this. I'm going to put one link in the chat here in just a few minutes. And what it has is it has a link to these are two sessions that we're doing, one for Entra and Intune next week and one for Windows 365. I'll put the, if my teammate Mike Broadbeck's on here, maybe he can do it. If not, then I'll do it in just a second. We have two sessions that you can attend next week around Windows 365 and then Entra and Intune. And if you join, you can win a chance to get a Windows 365 Link device. I've also got a session coming up on August 20th with Logitech where we're going to be doing the Teams Rooms devices again. And I don't have the registration for that, but I'll make sure and share it at some point in this in another one of our future sessions for this series. And that the August 20th session is actually going to be you have a chance to win. I think it's 5 Logitech headsets, and my teammate John Baker, who did the on-site deployment for Infocom, is going to be coming on and sharing his tips for how to make sure that you're successful when you're on-site deploying these. Another thing that I want to share with you is, and I'll just bring this back up. We do have services for, just like we have services for Windows endpoints, we have services to register Windows-based Teams Rooms devices, just like I talked about for Autopilot. So we can register them before it leaves our warehouse, and then you'll have line of sight to it, so you can start doing the configurations in Intune and the things that I just showed you. And then the last thing I did, if you're familiar with, there's a lady that works at Microsoft. Her name is Amanda Stewart, and she is she knows everything about Teams Rooms devices, and she's a real big champion for the AI-powered workplace. Just the other day, she sent me some slides that talk about everything new with Teams Rooms devices. There's a lot of good information here, updated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a link here in just a few minutes, put it in the chat, and you'll have access to all of these things. So the sessions, my slides, the flyer for Teams Rooms device, the service that we have for Autopilot, and then also the AI-powered workplaces. I know that's kind of a lot of information, but just some resources for you to take and hopefully go and do some of these things on your side. The last thing I'll say is that Teams Rooms devices has been kind of a niche thing that I've been working on for years, but I haven't put anything together from a training perspective. So I wanted to do that. What I'm hoping is that, as a partner and maybe an MSP partner, you're coming in and when you have opportunities for Teams Rooms devices, because of enablement like this and training like this, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable moving forward or passing this off to your on-site or your technician